We don't really talk to each other. No, these
He
things have-
often says, you're the one that got away. He loves to say that.
Well, yeah.
From the moment Sally Field met Burt Reynolds on the set of Smokey and the Bandit, the world assumed they stumbled into a dream romance. Their chemistry was undeniable. Their banter felt effortless, and audiences became convinced they shared the kind of love only Hollywood could create. But people who worked behind the scenes later described something entirely different, something far more complicated than the carefree image that played out in theaters. Sally entered the relationship with a rising career and a hopeful heart, but Burt's presence came with an intensity that surprised even seasoned members of the crew. Several staff members from productions they worked on over the years recalled how fast things escalated once the cameras stopped rolling. Burt wanted her near him at all times, and he made his preferences known in ways that did not leave much room for negotiation. One former crew member claimed that when Burt wanted Sally on set, everyone around him adjusted instantly because they understood how strongly he reacted when things did not go his way. He had insisted she be cast in Smokey and the Bandit, which sounded romantic on the surface, but insiders later questioned whether it was affection or control. Burt wanted Sally as his leading lady, in his movie, under his influence, and that dynamic followed them from project to project. Their relationship became a kind of closed world where he steered everything: publicity, interviews, even how close she stood next to him during press events. Sally often looked radiant and relaxed in television appearances, yet crew members said the atmosphere shifted the moment the stage lights went off. There were reports of tense exchanges in trailers, abrupt demands, and moments when Sally seemed to navigate around Burt's moods with remarkable care. She had learned early on how to calm him, redirect him, or soften her tone to avoid conflict. People who worked near them recognized the signs. She was protecting him, but also protecting herself. During scenes where they laughed, flirted, and played the perfect pair, there were often long pauses afterward, as the crew reset, and Burt pulled the energy sharply in another direction. What surprised everyone most was how quickly the pattern formed. The same man the world admired for his charm had a forcefulness that left little room for anything except his way of doing things. Sally adjusted, adapted, and tried to keep the peace. But those close to production noticed the emotional weight settling onto her. And this was only the beginning. The real storm revealed itself once the world outside their films began paying attention, and Burt's temper became impossible to ignore. Long before Sally Field ever walked into Burt Reynolds' life, Hollywood had seen the side of him she later described with painful accuracy. His temper was not a rumor whispered in dark studio corners. It was something people encountered often enough that it became part of his reputation. Burt did not bother hiding irritation, and when he felt slighted, he reacted with the kind of heat that made everyone around him pay attention. Actors, crew members, talk show hosts, and even fans shared memories of moments when Burt's patience snapped without warning. One of the most cited examples is the Tonight Show incident, where he threw water on another guest simply because the man turned to speak with Jay Leno. That moment did not reveal a playful spark or a harmless prank. It showed the streak of bruising pride everyone in the business had seen at one time or another. If Burt felt ignored, overshadowed, or challenged, he met it head-on, often aggressively, and people learned to tread softly around him. Industry veterans had their own stories. Burt blowing up over scheduling changes, lashing out when a director made a decision he did not like, or taking control of scenes because he refused to let anyone else shape the moment. Crew members spoke of filming days that ended early because tension hit a level no one could break through. And when Burt was paired with someone he truly cared about, those reactions only intensified. His emotions ran deep, but they also ran hot, and whoever stood closest to him absorbed the force of that heat. By the time he and Sally became a couple, insiders already knew she was stepping into a storm she did not fully understand. She was beloved for her warmth and her thoughtful approach to every role. But those qualities did not shield her from the emotional pressure that came with Burt's unpredictable moods. Some people working on their films said they could sense the shift in the air when Burt grew frustrated. Conversations dropped, movements froze, and even Sally seemed to brace herself. Hollywood had seen many actors with volatile tempers, but Burt's stood out because he held so much power at the height of his career. He knew studios wanted him, he knew audiences adored him, and he knew that people rarely challenged him. That kind of freedom does not soften a temper, it sharpens it. And for Sally, this was only the beginning. Burt's temper was not the hardest part. The real impact came from the control he tried to maintain over every step she took, both in front of the camera and far away from it. During the years she was involved with Burt Reynolds, Sally Field carried the weight of a truth she could not say out loud. While the public adored their romance and celebrated their screen chemistry, she was living through a relationship that demanded more from her than anyone outside their circle. Realized Sally later described how she felt pulled into Burt's orbit in a way that left her struggling to hold on to her own identity. She loved him, but the cost of that love grew heavier with each passing year. In interviews from the late 1970s, Sally spoke carefully, always choosing words that protected Burt. She smiled through uncomfortable questions, deflected when hosts pushed for details, and made excuses for his behavior, long before anyone knew she was doing it. Yet the strain showed in small ways. People close to her noticed how she changed her schedule, her tone, even her body language when Burt was nearby. She adjusted herself to keep him calm, something she revealed decades later when she finally described how exhausting it was to manage his moods. Her memoir opened the door to the reality she had locked away. She explained that Burt's influence seeped into everything, her confidence, her decisions, her sense of safety. She felt pressure to match his emotional swings, to reassure him when he acted out, and to accept behavior that she later admitted left her drained. This was not a partnership where she could grow freely. It was a relationship where she constantly monitored the air around them, trying to anticipate what might set him off. What made it harder was the way the world idolized Burt. His fame acted like a shield, and Sally often found herself defending actions that made her uncomfortable simply because she did not want the public to see him the way she sometimes saw him in private. She felt responsible for smoothing the edges of his temper, softening his image, and keeping the peace, even if it meant sidelining her own needs. She later admitted that she learned to shrink herself to avoid conflict, and that habit followed her long after the relationship ended. The pressure intensified when Burt began speaking publicly about their bond, often framing it as something grand and unbreakable. Sally felt trapped between her private pain and the larger-than-life narrative he built around them. Fans clung to that narrative for decades, unaware that the woman at the center of it was struggling to breathe. But, as difficult as this chapter was, it set the stage for an even more complicated truth, the point where Burt's influence stretched beyond emotions and into the choices she made in her career. And that is where the story takes a turn that even longtime fans never saw coming. As Sally Field's relationship with Burt Reynolds deepened, another layer of tension formed, one that reached straight into her career. Hollywood insiders had whispered for years that Burt wanted control over which projects she took, which co-stars she worked with, and how much independence she was allowed professionally. While not every rumor was confirmed, the pattern they suggested matched exactly what Sally later described: a relationship where her success threatened his sense of control. During the Smokey and the Bandit era, Burt was one of the biggest stars in the world, and studios bent to his demands. When he pushed for Sally to be cast alongside him, many believed it was an act of support, but insiders questioned whether it was truly a gesture of affection or a way to shape her career so it revolved around his own. He enjoyed having her on his sets, under his watch, and in roles that kept her close to him. Several reports claimed he bristled when she considered projects that did not involve him, especially if they required strong male leads he did not personally approve of. Some crew members from later films said they saw moments where Burt pressured her to reconsider scripts she was excited about, especially if they did not align with his plans. One person who worked with them recalled the uneasy atmosphere whenever Sally received praise from directors or producers. It was as if her rising acclaim threatened the balance he wanted to maintain Burt had enormous influence during that time, and some in the industry believed he used it to shape not only his own path, but hers as well. Then there were the regrets Burt confessed later in life. The long list of major films he turned down, roles that could have redefined his career. He admitted it with a mix of pride and frustration, acknowledging that he walked away from projects that became historic successes. To fans, these confessions suggested a pattern of impulsive decision-making. To those analyzing his relationship with Sally, it hinted at the chaos she lived through. A man who rejected films like Rocky, Die Hard, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was a man who operated by instinct first, reflection second. That kind of unpredictability affected everything around him, including the woman he insisted he loved. When Sally finally stepped into roles that earned her awards and critical respect, some insiders quietly mentioned that Burt became unsettled by how quickly she outpaced him in prestige. Her success was undeniable, and while he publicly celebrated her, people close to them believed there was tension beneath the compliments. She was rising, and he was losing control, not just of the relationship, but of the story he wanted the world to believe. This tension eventually cracked the foundation of their bond, because when Sally tried to move forward, Burt tried to pull her back, and that tug-of-war set the stage for the years where he would chase her, calling her the one that got away, long after she knew she could never return. By the time their relationship finally collapsed, Sally Field had reached a breaking point. She stepped away because she had to rebuild herself, but Burt Reynolds did not let go easily. What followed became one of the most complicated chapters of their story. Years of him declaring his love for her, calling her the great loss of his life, and insisting that she was the one woman who truly understood him. To the public, these statements sounded romantic, almost tragic. But to Sally, they were reminders of a past she had fought hard to leave behind. Burt's pursuit of her after the breakup surprised even people who knew him well. He spoke about her in interviews, hinted that she was the only person who ever reached him, and described their breakup as something he never fully accepted. He could not resist framing it as a love story that slipped through his fingers. Fans embraced those words, but insiders noticed something deeper, a fixation that never faded, even as decades passed. Whenever Burt faced professional setbacks or personal struggles, he revisited the same narrative. Sally was the love he lost, and nothing ever matched her. But Sally had a very different version of that history. She made it known, especially in later years, that he did not truly understand what she needed. She explained that his idea of love was intense, consuming, and ultimately suffocating for her. The bond he described so dramatically came with pressure, emotional strain, and expectations she could not keep meeting. And while Burt wanted a reunion, she wanted the space to breathe. She was raising her sons, building a career on her own terms, and healing from the emotional weight she carried during their time together. Burt often spoke about wanting her back, but Sally knew returning would pull her into the same cycle she fought to escape. The regrets he expressed later in life, the decisions he made, the roles he turned down, the relationships he damaged, revealed a man who rarely looked inward until it was too late. Sally recognized that pattern. She had lived through it, and she knew that stepping back into that world would endanger the person she had finally become. When Burt published his final memoir near the end of his life, he devoted entire passages to Sally. He framed her as the woman he never stopped loving, the one he should have married, the one who, in his eyes, represented everything he wished he had handled better. Many fans saw his words as raw honesty, but others wondered if they were another chapter in the story he always wanted people to believe, that he was the wounded romantic, longing for the woman he once treated with unpredictable intensity. Sally did not respond with anger or bitterness. She responded with distance. She respected his legacy, acknowledged the impact they had on each other, and maintained a boundary that told the true story. She had left for a reason, and that reason ran deeper than anyone realized until she finally chose to speak about it herself. But what she revealed at 79 changed everything, because it rewrote a legend people believed for 40 years. When Sally Field reached 79, She no longer carried the need to protect a narrative that never belonged to her. She had spent decades listening to people romanticize a relationship that, for her, had been far more painful than anyone imagined. And once Burt Reynolds passed, she finally spoke with the honesty she had held back for most of her life. She did not attack him, and she did not diminish what they shared. Instead, she revealed the truth in a way that shook fans who had believed in the legend of their perfect love story. In her memoir, and in interviews after Burt's death, Sally made it clear that their relationship had been filled with pressure she could not keep absorbing. She described feeling overwhelmed, pulled into a role she did not want to play, and constantly bending herself to meet the emotional demands he placed on her. She acknowledged that the world adored Burt, but she also made it known that adoration did not erase the strain he placed on the people closest to him. She emphasized that there were parts of their relationship she never felt safe unpacking while he was alive, not out of fear, but because she knew the public would not hear her without turning her honesty into an attack. Sally said the connection between them was deep, but deeply flawed. She explained how Burt tried to shape the relationship into something larger than life, something almost mythic. But that myth came with expectations she could not meet without losing herself. When she spoke about him in her later years, there was a calm firmness in her tone, a clarity that suggested she had spent decades examining what went wrong. She admitted that she kept her distance because she needed to protect her mental well-being, especially while raising her children and establishing her own identity separate from his shadow. She revealed that despite the affection she had for him, she felt trapped in a cycle where her emotions were constantly tied to his reactions. She recalled moments of heartache, moments when she felt unseen, and moments when the imbalance in their relationship made her realize she had to choose between the life he wanted and the life she deserved. These were truths she never voiced publicly during Burt's lifetime, because she did not want to be consumed by the backlash that would inevitably follow. Her revelations stunned fans because they challenged an image people had cherished for decades. Burt had spent years framing her as the love of his life, but Sally gently corrected that narrative by explaining that real love cannot grow where one person holds all the control. She honored their connection, but she also reclaimed her story, making it clear that walking away saved her. And that honesty, spoken after nearly half a century of silence, forced everyone to re-examine the legendary romance they thought they understood. Because the real truth, as Sally revealed it, was not a fairy tale. It was a warning about the cost of loving someone who never learned how to love in return. What she said at 79 changed everything. But the most surprising part was how fans responded once they understood what she had endured. Sally Field's honesty at 79 reshaped everything people thought they knew about her relationship with Burt Reynolds. For decades, fans believed in a love story built on charm and chemistry. But her later reflections revealed the real cost behind the scenes. She endured pressure, emotional strain, and a level of intensity that made it impossible for her to stay without losing herself. Burt's temper, his attempts to steer her choices, and his lifelong habit of rewriting their story pushed her into a role she could no longer play. When Sally walked away, she reclaimed her life and her voice. Her greatest performances came from the strength she built. After leaving him, Burt called her the one who got away. But Sally understood the truth. She left because she had to. And her willingness to reveal that truth decades later gave fans the clarity the legend never provided. Their story was not a fairy tale. It was a warning about the difference between love that lifts you up and love that pulls you under. And in the end, Sally's courage to speak openly became the final chapter she always deserved.